Today, I'm talking with Emily Weber. We're talking about art school, the value of coffee breaks, and asking for help in our communities. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello everyone, and hello Emily. I think Emily, it's Emily Weber. Is that how I should pronounce it?
Yep.
I made in the beginning. I was never sure. I asked up front, and these days I'm like, I'm going to ask on camera because it's much nicer than everybody can hear it properly if I need to say it in a different way. And I want to show where we are, and I'm in Belgium, and this should, oops, it doesn't show on screen. It shows on screen now. That I'm in Belgium, and where is my mouse pointer here? And I'm moving to England, almost next to Liverpool, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And near to the sea. Okay, probably the location is not the exact location as where you are, but that's a little bit the idea on where you are.
I'm over on the peninsula, which is the Wirral.
And let's bring you back on screen. And here in Belgium, it's 11:35. And what's the time zone on your side?
We are 10:35 in British summertime.
Yeah, so it's a little more or less the same, but still not the same. That's how we roll these days, huh? That's a little bit. And Emily, for the few people that don't know you, introduce yourself. What do you want people to know about you?
I find this is always a tough one, I find. So
this is why I prefer that you do it.
I find it hard. So I am Emily. I am a agile organizational consultant. Is how I tend to call myself at the moment, which depends on the different situations I'm in. So I am an independent consultant. I work for myself. I do a lot of work with organizations, not necessarily with teams, but more kind of around teams. So helping organizations create environments where people can thrive so that the organizations can thrive. So I'm often doing work around joining people up or creating opportunities for people to kind of get better at what they do, either through training, learning, just setting up a general kind of learning environment and things that support that.
Wow. And yeah, I think this is how I got to know you, from different things that you also do with communities around these kind of things.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's probably what most people know me for, is joining people up through communities of practice, which I always find tends to kind of be really foundational in organizations for people to be their best and kind of generally raise the capability of everyone at the same time.
I fully agree. I think, yeah, sometimes when I work with communities outside companies, when at first I thought, okay, what is that's interesting? But actually, the more I do it, the more I learn. This is the actual work that also helps so much inside companies. The more we can create communities, the more we can create people that are, not the official network, but how they learn and how they collaborate. That is really something that is very powerful. That's been very nice. So I want to jump to that first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
So yeah, this is an interesting one, and I think I've been talking about this a bit recently, about how roles and capabilities and skills and everyone in team kind of overlaps with each other. So there's a lot of crossing over and complementary skills. And there's two women, Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis, I think it's that way around, have a book and a podcast around, I think, called Squiggly Careers, and this idea that we don't have these linear careers. We have these squiggly careers, and I definitely have a squiggly career. I've kind of moved from one place to another, all around and in every direction. But I think one of the things, and maybe people start to know this about me, because I do mention this particularly in a talk I'm doing recently. So I am a Master of Fine Art. I spent 6 years at art college, going to some very well-renowned London-based art colleges, and that was, I finished that in the early 2000s, and I think what that gives me is this ability to kind of, it's almost like you magpie stuff, take ideas from different places and put them together in new ways or through new lenses. And I think that's something that I tend to do in my working life now. I think that's a big part of what I do, as well as creating things. So creativity, I think, is something that I've never let go, that I'm always making things and putting things out in the world.
How would I say? So when you learned all these skills in art schools, how does that bring you then to where you are now?
Well, it's obvious link, right? Of course. Well, I mean, I've been around computers and doing things with computers and manipulating images and manipulating video. Most of the time that I've been doing, most of the time I was doing fine art. So when I was on my master's, for example, I was in an area called electronic media, and I was doing things with pulling images together and manipulating stuff as much as you could in the early 2000s and late 90s.
Yeah, I was thinking in 2000, there was a lot less of these kind of tools, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing a lot of stuff with blue screen. Actually, it was brilliant. A lot of stuff with Photoshop, a lot of good fun. And there was also, so I've always been around doing things with computers, and always been around computers, I guess, to a certain extent. There was also the opportunity when I was so the art college that I went to for my master's is called the Slade, and it's part of University College London, and it was set up very purposely by Felix Slade to kind of be surrounded by these other disciplines, so that you can kind of be influenced by them. Next door to
and they
us,
could be influenced by the art, I assume.
well, yeah, yeah, exactly, because crossing disciplines and learning from each other is brilliant. And next to us was the computer science department. I think I can see the quad now. I can see where they all are. Next to us was the computer science department, and they had a real media streaming server in late 90s, early 2000s, and nobody was using it. So me and another fellow student started using it. So we started streaming video over the internet in a very small pixelated box. And that led on to creating a net art space. So we were showing kind of online exhibitions and live exhibitions through the internet. So it's always been, I guess, been close to it for quite a while.
Wow, that's an interesting thing. And yeah, in that sense, you were using something that was not used from a different department, and that I can imagine that can inspire you to, okay, there is something available there. I think many artists, when they see something and it's sitting there, and it can trigger your imagination to start seeing how could we use it. I can definitely see that it can have an influence there. I want to move to the second question, which might be related, that if you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what could have become of you? Was that always something that you were destined to do with art, or was there something else before that you were even thinking about doing?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and maybe, when I left art college, my first I was looking for jobs in the arts, which was kind of normal. You either become an artist or an art teacher, or look for something in the arts. And I was working at a arts and music consultancy, and we were doing a lot of events. This is also very, very handy for my time as a kind of delivery manager type person, working in the arts and working in this arts and music consultancy meant that it was a lot of doing, a lot of organising stuff, producing events. I produced music events. I went on tour once, slept on a tour bus, tour
Wow.
managed. It's like my random background. So
anyone famous that we need to know?
probably not that famous, no. Do you know, back then, I was thinking about this other day because I just listened to this podcast about MySpace recently, using MySpace to find artists, because it was where they were at the time. Obviously, it's a long time ago. So I may have ended up doing more in that space, although I shifted from the arts into digital organisation at one point. But always, I'm quite a doer. Like I'm always this kind of creative thing, always making stuff happen. So anywhere that I would have ended up, it would have been making something happen. Yeah, I'm not sure where that might have been if I hadn't have been here.
But it's interesting that you were, when you say you were on a tour bus with people, I can still imagine that you were again on the doer side. So it's not just supporting; it's more active part of whatever that music group or whatever is doing. Is that a correct view of that situation?
Yeah, that was a bit of tour management. So that's getting everybody making sure everybody's on the bus, making sure everyone gets up, making sure that the venue has met its contractual agreements. Yeah.
And I assume that can come handy as well if you're working with teams these days, and that if everybody keeps their commitments or keeps doing what they promise to do, whatever it is, I can imagine. I see a lot of similarities there. That can definitely be it. So that's.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that I've always have an element of like, I just go and fix something, or I just go and make something happen. I don't. I get impatient of waiting around for other people to do stuff if it's not moving forward.
I can definitely, I can definitely see that. So, so what is? Let's. I want to move to that next question. What is your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you?
So I think thinking about this personally, is that I consider myself to be an introvert. And there's definitely when I was younger, I think excuse me, making this element of like making myself heard without kind of stepping forward. Like I would never, when I was younger in my first job, picking up the phone was something that would just be like, I can't pick up the phone and talk to people. And I think there's a element, and I know lots of people talk about imposter syndrome and anxiety and all that, and that is kind of often talked about at the moment. But I think that has been a huge challenge for me. But what I tend to do is just take opportunities when they arise and force myself into situations. So like I wouldn't be, do public speaking quite a fair bit, and I get invited to go to different countries and speak at conferences, and that's all brilliant. And maybe I wouldn't have done that as much if I hadn't been like, I'm going to put myself in a situation where I can't back out, because I've kind of, my past self has made me do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also see with the fantasy I have, you create some kind of communities where people talk to each other. That also kind of, and you do it mostly, well, these days, a lot of it is doing from home. Everybody's connecting from home. Is that helping you in that sense? Because it's not just you in the picture, it's multiple people talking to each other. It's from your own, room, I would say. Is that helping you in these kind of situations?
I don't know. I mean, I often put myself in this situation now where I am, facilitating those kind of conversations. So it's not, not an opportunity, I guess. So it's not a situation where I kind of step back because I've put myself in the situation to take a facilitative role, I guess, in that.
But it does give you a role. I mean, if it
Mhm.
just what you're just talking about picking up the phone and then launching a conversation, where if you're in the facilitating role, it might feel easier, or at least I know for me it feels easier because I have the role and it's like, okay, this is what I need to do, and it kind of is much easier than, okay, at the free network event, okay, let's talk to people.
Yeah.
How do I start? How do I do this? Is that similar with you?
Yeah, I think so, actually. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, giving yourself, and it's the same, I think, with public speaking. It's right. The role is to start to be on stage,
Be there.
share some things. In that situation, I find then people come up and talk to you afterwards, and sometimes you're like, I don't know how to. It's a very different situation.
It's
Yeah,
easier when people come to talk to you after a talk than go out and talk to the others. That's what
yeah.
I'm hearing.
I think
Well,
so, yeah,
depending on.
and it's definitely a reason. Like I often encourage people to do public speaking and go to conferences as a speaker because the experience is very different. If you go to a conference on your own as an attendee, that can be quite, unless you're super extrovert, that can be quite a difficult position to be in because you're like, how do I kind of meet people if you're somewhere on your own? Whereas if you go as a speaker, not only you kind of have this network of other speakers, but also, you've got up and said something and people come and talk to you. It does make it easier.
It's interesting, yeah, because it's what you basically say is that the most extrovert people, they will go to a conference and they'll meet anyone, and the introverts, they need to be on stage to have the best experience. But I recognize it, and it's, yeah, many introverts have told me something similar. Yeah, that for them it feels, yeah, it's their kind of way to reach out and have people. And it's not that introverts don't want to talk to people. It's more like, okay, it's taking a lot of energy, and it's also about how do you then do this, because it's we need some kind of way to do that, or kind of tips and tricks. And when you're out on stage, it's a lot easier. And that question had two parts. It's what's your biggest challenge, and why is that a good thing for you? Could you say some more about that last part?
I guess I think the good thing is the way that I deal with that is by kind of forcing myself to do stuff. So if someone is saying, I guess, is saying yes to stuff because I know that if I don't, then I won't do it. And that, I think that's come from a lot of things. Whether it be like I had someone years ago, I had Radio Nottingham like, can we interview you on air about something really random? And I was like, yeah, sure. Came out of that thinking that was really random and probably terrible, but it was like, it's just a useful, I guess, a useful thing to force myself into a situation.
Yeah, so in that sense, randomly saying yes, maybe not even knowing what you say yes to, because that's how the interview sounded. But have extra experiences.
Yeah, that was that one was. So I used to run a photo blog called London Shop Fronts, which I ran for a couple of years. And I used to take photos of shop fronts in London, of which I have a couple of thousand, which is a lot. And they wanted to talk to me about that, but I don't really know why. I don't understand how that fit into their programming in any way.
And is that blog with the photos still around? Is that still somewhere?
It's still online, yeah. I don't live in London anymore, and I haven't taken photos of it for a long time. But that's been that was an interesting thing. I ended up in the Guardian Weekend magazine and on the Today programme on radio, BBC Radio 4, both through that blog.
But yeah, at some point you moved, and then but it still is around. But that's also part of life, in the sense that we make sometimes, and a little bit like artists, you make it at some point, and then it gets its own life, even if you as an artist are no longer involved in it. So that's and do you still have people getting in touch with you for what's there, or is that something that is completely?
No, not really, except to sometimes get the odd company asking me to quote for replacing their shop front, which is always funny.
Okay, because then because they moved on or something has changed.
Yeah, I don't make shop fronts.
Okay, let's move to the next question. That's kind of we already talked a little bit about some of these things. What drives you? Because the way I know you, you're a passionate person about multiple different things in multiple directions. But do you know where that passion or that drive is coming from?
I guess there's a couple of things. I think, like, I did go through a period, I think, with this idea of creativity, and I was like, well, I don't do creativity anymore. I'm not, I haven't made art for 20 years or something, aside from the photo blog. But then I kind of realized that is inherent, and kind of it is part of my personality. Like, creating things is something that I do. Creating things and putting them out in the world and seeing what people do with them is always really interesting to me. So I'm often just sharing stuff. I think sharing models that I make, and I'm also, I think the other thing that really, and I guess this fits in with the community, is just bringing people together and seeing what happens. Is, I guess, something I love seeing. Like, I really like if you're able to bring a bunch of people together and something happens that no longer has your hand in it. Like, it's just people connecting and amazing things happening off the back of that. That makes, I guess, that gives me good, warm, fuzzy feelings.
And so that's what you like, that when you basically you get people to connect, because I feel you didn't say it about the art part, but I feel it was a little bit there as well. You create something and you want people to, well, maybe not connect, but at least to look at these things and look at what you're doing. And that gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. Is that something similar there, or is there a difference?
There's probably an overlap for sure. It's, I guess, an example of the people connecting. So the community that I run, which is off the meetup that I run, which is Agile in the Ether, there's a community that kind of sits behind that is people that have been to the meetup, and there are people that have been on that community for years. And I guess there's a couple of things. Like, somebody the other day was talking about the fact that they have recently got a new job, and there's a really direct correlation between them getting that job and their involvement in the community. And it's been like, they not only did they meet people from the organization, they also, because we have this talk swap, so people go and speak at each other's, virtually talk at each other's organizations, because it's like a mutual, I'll talk at your organization, you talk at my organization, through the community. They spoke at that organization, and then when they went for the interview, they even skipped out an interview step because they'd seen them before talk at that organization. And it's just, that is just like, that's just wonderful to see. It's like, wow, this, like, I guess I created something that then led other people to build on top of it and end up being in a better situation than before.
Yeah, and the question I then have is that, do you know where that kind of passion that you have for to do these kind of things, where that comes from? Do you have any idea what inspired working in that way, or doing these kind of things?
Not really, no. I don't know.
That's also an answer, eh?
I'm also, I mean, the other bit of me is like, I'm really driven by like just fixing stuff. Like if stuff doesn't work, I'll be like, how can we just fix this and do this? So like I'll do things because I'll be like, well, that doesn't exist. I'll just do it. Oh look, I'll just show how I can just put some stuff together and do this thing over there, or
And
which is
and,
like,
and is that community then a kind of fixing the, I don't know, the environment or fixing
yeah,
the world
yeah,
in a
yeah.
way? It's, how could I help make people better connect? And is that something that you've done since you were little, or did you see that when that started?
Um, I think something I've done since I was little. I'm not really sure when that started. I think no.
Yeah, but I'm just curiously asking, but it could be that you don't know. It's
Yeah, yeah.
perfectly fine as well. I'm just very curious because indeed I see a lot of that in you,
Mhm.
in that agile in the ether every time. There's also a lot of small little things that you do to make that community, yeah, vibe and thrive in a way. So that's yeah, it's interesting to see if you know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement? And before we go into that, I want to ask the question that's actually below it, and that is, this is because basically this is a question to allow you to brag. And so, is that something that is easy for family to be proud of the things that you achieved?
It's a difficult one, I think. um Yeah, I think this is a whole, and it's fun because I have a lot of people that say to me, "You do so much stuff," which I don't necessarily feel like I do. Like someone the other day was like, I've read your blog, and you write all this stuff, and you do all this stuff, and you know publish books and set up communities and whatever." And it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't feel like I do loads of stuff. It feels like I do a normal amount of stuff. But I mean, maybe other people don't think that's the case. Um,
Apparently, they don't.
no. I think and it's interesting because I recently, like, I guess 8 months ago, 9 months ago, whenever it was, I moved house. So we moved out of London and we moved up to the Wirral, and I live next to the sea. And there is like literally next to the sea. I can see the sea from my window when I wake up in the morning, and it is an amazing point where me and my husband kind of go, just look out the window sometimes and say, "We live here. This is amazing." And there's, I think the way that, I talk about this with him a bit. I think the way that we kind of approach life is almost like, how do we get ourselves into, it's almost like options theory, like how do we get ourselves, maybe not options theory, how do we get ourselves into a position where we are not locking ourselves into too much, if that makes sense. So it's like,
Mm.
how do we
Keep
uh,
our options open.
yeah, how do we reduce our outgoings enough so that if we don't want to work for a bit, we don't have to work for a bit? Or how do we like reduce, like, not how can we buy the biggest house we can possibly buy? How can we buy a house that puts us in a position where we keep our options open? Um those
Yeah,
those,
I can
those
imagine buying a house in London. It kind of locks you in for a long time because they're very expensive over there.
yeah. So it's like, how can we, and then we were like, how can we live somewhere where city isn't too far away? Liverpool's a little city, but it's there, and next to the sea, and do all this stuff and position ourselves so that we've got as many options as possible. I think that's how we live our lives. So that's in terms of achievement. I think that's, we've got ourselves in a really nice position. So my husband could switch careers, and we can feel, yeah, I guess some comfort in that.
That's a very nice achievement to be in, if you can actually, because it basically means also, yeah, getting a hold of your life and being on control of your life and not being controlled by indeed yeah, then you have a bigger house, and then you have this, and then you have that. It's very tempting to roll into, yeah, a kind of life that, if you then look back, like, okay, why did I get here, and how did it, yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that you designed your life, okay, like, okay, I have now a very nice house near the sea, that doesn't force me to do whatever. So that is indeed a very nice achievement, to have the life that that basically gives you much more opportunities than locking you in. So that's thanks for sharing that, because it's I think it's for many people a dream and not easy to achieve, because it also means that you really have to think hard and say no to certain opportunities that are tempting to go to. And yeah, and then that's what I sometimes see people locked in, and it's like, yeah, but I can't leave my job because I need it, for this and for that. It's like, wait, yeah, these are all choices that you make, and it's okay to have these, to make these choices, but realize it's a choice.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, I had to kind of caveat that slightly with, you know, some fortunate decisions along the way, and being probably being a little bit older. I wouldn't want to be a young person trying to get on the housing market right now.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I bought my first house, a very small house, so just for one person, after a year of working. Um, and it was a lot of money for me at that time, but I didn't want to waste my money on other things. But if I look back now, it was like, it's insane how cheap it was. I think it's been 10 or 20 times double in price since that time. So that's yeah, that's indeed the right moment at the right time. That's for sure. I think a lot of, well, I think, but I think that might be true for most achievements that people talk about here, is that there is also a lot of luck involved in all the achievements that all of us have. And yeah, it's good that you bring it up, because it shouldn't feel that everybody could achieve everything that anyone else has achieved. There's always a lot of luck involved. I think that's important to realize that also. There is choices, but there is also a lot of luck.
I think,
Indeed. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, added to that, I do, and kind of, I guess back to what I was saying before, I think there's an element of just kind of saying yes to stuff and seeing where things take you, and giving things a go. And I do know a lot of people that feel very, I guess, sometimes a bit stuck. So people will, they won't blog about stuff because they don't think they have got stuff to talk about, or they won't take opportunities because they think that, you know, maybe I shouldn't. Like, even back to I saw this when I was working. So when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I was working in the sorting office. So I worked for the Royal Mail. It's part of my random jobs. I mean, I used to sew theatrical curtains at one point, but everyone was like a basic postal grade, and we were in the sorting office sorting out letters into sizes. And you could apply to go up a grade, so you could be a higher grade. And the way that you did that is you did a test, and if you passed the test, you became a higher grade postal person, and you got more money per hour. And I went for that, did it, great. They taught me how to touch type, so I used to type postcodes into a computer. And there were so many people there that I met that wouldn't go for the test because they were scared of failing it. And it didn't really matter, because you took the test. If you passed, great, you got more money. If you didn't pass, you can try again in like a month's time or a couple of months' time or something like this. There's no kind of cost to it, except maybe people feeling like they
I failed.
feeling like they failed. So you'd see this thing where people wouldn't take it, and it would always be like, just do it, just do it. It doesn't matter. There's no risk to it. And I kind of see that throughout my life as well. People that like don't take opportunities that are there, that actually there isn't really any risk. Like, the worst that can happen is you don't get the thing, or it doesn't happen. Like, nothing, you know.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of discussion with one of my children that caught me on saying something wrong in English, and was like, okay, thanks for telling me, but at the same time, I don't worry that I make a mistake. And when my teacher of English of I don't know, when I was 12 or 13 would look at me, would be very surprised, because I really had very bad grades, like 20 or 30% of English and French, and it was really bad. And but the way the system worked, and the way it was really about, okay, writing and everything, and about using exact words, but not about speaking. And I've learned so much since, that for me it's like, okay, I just need to speak and use languages all the time. I don't worry if I use the wrong words, if people understand me. And that was the funny thing. My daughter laughed at me because I said something wrong, but she did understood me. And it was like, yeah, what's the message? Okay, I understand it's good to have better English, but at the same time, I don't worry, because people understand me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more about that. For me, communication is about making sure that we can connect, that we can talk, and gradually I will learn to speak better and learn. And I'm really happy that people correct me, and okay, I've learned a new words. But at the same time, I don't see it as a failure. For me, it's like, okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
um
And
and I
the other
see
one
that in.
is you don't
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
anything, and then nobody it's like
Yeah, and
nobody
then
can understand you because you haven't said anything.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like you better just start using words and whatever. I remember the first moment that I felt I could speak French was when I was in on holiday, and then Dutch girls asked me to translate to French boys, because they wanted to hang out and they couldn't understand each other. And I was really I just failed the test for French, so I was really bad in school. I had to repass my school year because of French. And that gave me so much energy trying to translate, and people were really happy. Yeah, but you do understand a lot of French. And I was like, yeah, I entered school back with the idea, okay, I know how to speak French. I still was bad at whatever the school wanted, but at least I had the feeling like, okay, French is when I talk it's much more interesting. And that's the thing. Once you get, that this is what I want to do with that. That's you get it. And it reminds me a lot of what musicians in the punk movement. It's like, okay, it's not about great whatever. It's about the number of notes you play per minute. No, it's more like, okay, can I make a raw sound that makes something, and can I get the energy that I want out of the crowd, and whatever. That's the kind of thing where I think inspired a lot of musicians to do other stuff. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah, art is really similar actually. And so in school, I didn't get a very good grade in my art A level, because it was very much. It always felt very much about how well you could paint, and that was
Mm.
the how well can I render something in paint, or create a sculpture. Definitely at my school. And then I went on from there, from not doing particularly well in my art A level to going to do my foundation course at Central St Martin's, which wasn't particularly easy to get into, and then realised that actually art is not about how well you can paint at all. It's about concepts and theory, and then how you use medium in with those things to convey something, which is very different.
Mm. Yeah, and of course, techniques can help you for some of the things, but if you don't have the inspiration, if you don't have the creativity to think about something, then yeah, it's a whole different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, and I think if you look back now at paintings from so many years, some people might like some of the techniques, but yeah, the scenery likes strange or whatever. That it different arts inspire different kind of people as well. I think, of course.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of, there's a lot of famous artists who don't do any of their own artwork, or don't actually fabricate anything themselves. Like other people do that for them. And that's going
Yeah.
back forever.
Yeah, that's what we don't always know. Indeed, that when we look at a painting from a famous painter, that maybe a lot of his students are doing actually a lot of the painting that might move on later on, and whatever. But that's indeed something we don't always talk about or think about. That's actually a very good reminder to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
So yeah, I mean, I think mine is to just try stuff out. So probably back to what I was saying before, it's like there is, if there's, you know, trying something out in a low risk way, which is how do you, those kind of incremental improvements by seeing if something works or not. So, if somebody says they can't, they like blogging feels very like a big thing to do, then it's like, try it out, write something. You don't have to write a massive blog post. Actually, most people don't engage particularly well with big blog posts. So just sharing an idea and seeing what happens. Or people that are saying they don't have stuff to share when they're doing public speaking. It's like, try something out at a meetup, like trying stuff out if the opportunity is there, even if a new job comes up that you might apply to, just you could do that, don't have to take it. Like what's the just kind of going and doing things. Like I had again recently people saying to me, how do you write a book? I was like, well, you just start, or just share some ideas and see how people respond to them and see if that will grow into something else. So like I think I generally have a bit of a bias to action. There is a bit of me that I get frustrated if things aren't happening and moving, so I'll just work out how to do things and get them done. So the reason I can put a website together or use design software or write a book, for example, is because I'm like, well, I'll just do it. Let me just get on and do this thing, see what happens.
Nobody told you couldn't do it, so you just did it, or something like that.
Exactly. And if they do tell me I can't do it, I probably won't listen.
Yeah, but I think it's very good advice indeed for people to hear. Like, okay, let's just start doing it and see what comes to that. Saying yes to the world. It's interesting. I see a lot of people worried that they will have too much to do, and for that they say no to everything. And then the opposite. Okay, you have people that have too much busy and whatever. They need to learn to say no. But there seems to be very little people who are somewhere in the middle. That okay, we need to say yes, and then we need to look at our own time and look at and understand it. But indeed, many people say no before even considering things. They want to, but what if, but what if not? What if everything works out? And just starting a blog and nobody reads it, okay, that's fine. Then you've maybe learned something. Maybe it's there is no marketing. Maybe you're bad at writing. Maybe you're bad at continuing. Maybe you're bad at whatever. But you tried something that is indeed something. And if it's not blogging, then you can take on something else. Like you say, your blog post with the pictures. I assume there's not much text there, but at least there were a lot of pictures there. That's what I understand. So that's also kind of creation. You don't always have to write stuff to have things moving forward or creating stuff.
There's always it's amazing because the amount of opportunities that arise I think just from you putting things out into the world as well. So like I mentioned with the London Shopfronts blog, ended up with me being invited to speak at a conference and then ending up in the Guardian Weekend magazine. It's a great photo of me in in the magazine, or being invited to speak on Radio 4, or these things that kind of appear because you put yourself out there. Like recently, I went to New York to speak at QCon a few weeks back. People are like, oh, that's glamorous. How did you get invited to New York? And it's like, well, because you just put yourself
doing stuff,
just talk, and then eventually, people invite you to stuff. The other thing which I find kind of, so I wrote, I have a paper in a scientific journal, which I co-wrote with Robin Dunbar from Dunbar's Number, the evolutionary anthropologist, which is great because he's really interesting work around kind of human group sizing. And then people said to me, how did that happen? How did you get to do that? And I said, well, how I got to do that is I did a little bit of research, and I saw some correlation in my findings with Dunbar's number. So I just sent him an email and said, "Oh, you might be interested in
As
this."
you do.
And he actually, I don't think he lives that far away from me now, actually. So I sent him an email, and then he was like, "Oh, that's great. Can we turn this into a paper?" Now he's a tenured professor, so I'm assuming, that's good for him. It was good for me. And people say, "Well, how do you make that happen?" And the answer is, well, I don't know. You email people, and they can ignore you. They can say no, thank you, or maybe something will happen. Again, it's really low risk, because if nothing happens, then nothing happens, and that's fine.
Yeah, I have similar experiences when people say, so many people in the agile world. How do you know them? Well, in many cases, it's because I read a book and I don't understand it, and I'm asking just an email to the author because I'm just like, sorry, I'm too dumb to understand it. Could you say it in other words? And that's how I get to know some people. And most people are just generously replying and saying, okay, this is what you misunderstand. This is, or maybe, yeah, and that's just that. And not being afraid to just send an email and to ask people a question, that gets us a lot going. And most people that wrote the book are really happy to answer that, and they're really happy that at least somebody read their book, or at least that somehow a little bit in some of the reactions, like, oh, I get to someone who takes the time to not only read my book but also get me a question. Most people love that. And like you say, some people never reply, and okay, then I continue. I'll probably forget about the book, and others, will just reply, and it might end up in doing something together. That like you say, so that's very nice.
And
For
those
me,
connections
go ahead.
are, those connections make your network, make your opportunities, and even if they're not immediate, they happen. Something, there's serendipity somewhere that might happen.
Yeah, I think reaching out to a lot of people in multiple ways can reach back to you at some point, and it might be, and sometimes we totally don't see the connection. I remember somewhere at the Agile conference that someone stepped up to me, "Are you Eve?" It's like, "Yeah, okay, I really wanted to meet you." I was like, "Why? What?" And yeah, there was a famous Agilist that really came to talk to me, and I still do. I know her very well these days, Joanna Rotman. But I'm really like, why did she at that moment came to me? I still don't know. But it was a very great conversation for something that probably happened before, and created a good connection for many long time. So that was and sometimes I didn't see, well, at that moment I didn't see it coming where it came from. But like you say, it's probably serendipity for talking and doing many other things at some other point. That's the interesting part there. Okay, I want to move to remote work. Did you because the Agile in the Ether is completely remote, or is mostly remote, I think. Completely remote. Did you do anything remote before COVID? Was that something that was new to you, or I assume you did, but I'm not sure.
Well, so Agile in the Ether has been going since 2018. So it is
Even
5
before.
years old this month, actually.
Wow! Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's still really popular, which I
Wait. Let me. I can't turn it off. It's just started and then it has to run. But for 5 years, it's worthwhile, I think.
Yes, thank you. So yes, so I've been running Agile in the Ether since long before everybody else put their meetups online, of course. And I ran a Agile in the Ether conference as well. So I did a online conference pre-COVID, which was great fun. Had some brilliant people talking, lots of opportunities for people to chat together. So I guess when COVID came along, I had some of that already. Like how do you get people to connect whilst kind of through a screen? Interestingly, actually, I met someone when I went to Agile Manchester this year. I met someone face to face, I hadn't realized I'd never met face to face before, because I've known them for 5 years on Agile and Ether. So I do really believe that you can. Well, I know I've seen it. You can make kind of real human connections whilst not being face to face, but you do have to be quite, I guess, purposeful about it and deliberate about it. You can't, and actually it's the same with communities. You can't just shove people together and go, there you go, you're a community, do stuff. There's kind of some careful curating and some careful thinking behind that, and there is behind Agile and Ether. So I guess I had some of that already. The thing that I'd done some remote work already, but the thing I guess the thing that I wasn't quite prepared for, and I think people are still suffering from this. So when I, as a consultant with multiple clients, when kind of early on in COVID, I was trying to do too much all at the same time, and it's very difficult when you're sitting in the same chair and you're just kind of shifting from client to client, sometimes in the same day, which is very different from I'm going into an office and I'm with this client today. It's like, oh, a couple of hours here and a couple of hours here and a couple of hours here, and it's just it was just too much, because it's you're just context switching all the time, and it's very difficult. And I see this, one thing I've noticed with Agile and Ether particularly, and the same with kind of any online meetings, is that people did used to have time between meetings. Maybe that's time walking from one meeting room to another meeting room, or whatever that might be, but there was definitely some breathing space. And that's still gone out the window. People definitely do back to back meetings, because they're not moving out their chair, so there isn't any kind of decompression time in between. I see it with Agile and Ether, because no one turns up early anymore, and everyone leaves dead on the time it finishes, because they have nothing in between, or it's I just need to have a comfort break quickly before the next meeting, so everyone's kind of running around. So I think one important thing there is kind of understanding your own boundaries and setting those boundaries. So I've learned better to set my boundaries with clients when I'm working remotely. I think generally people are still working that out. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is those, which I think we're all feeling, is those moments for serendipity to happen are far reduced, because people in a meeting,
we don't run into each other occasionally and whatever. We need to kind of schedule around it, but that's again more meetings and
yeah. And I it's that you see a lot of people talk about, you shouldn't have a meeting that doesn't have an agenda. So I'm pro meetings that don't have agendas as well. I'm pro the idea that you just sometimes you get together for half an hour with no specific purpose, and the purpose might be just to chat about stuff.
Well, I fully agree there, because what we used to do when we go to the office is that, okay, we're there 5 to 10 minutes before, and then there is some time to chat, but that's gone out of the window. What I wanted to reply to you earlier on when you said there's back-to-back meetings scheduled, is that the previous limitation is gone, meaning the limitation in offices is the office space. You don't have that much office to have meeting rooms. You don't have that much meeting rooms to have meetings in. And now, because we have unlimited meetings, and that's exactly what's happening, we have lots of meetings. In a sense, sometimes some of these meetings are better, because it's not always with 20 people. It's now more one-on-ones. That's for me sometimes better meetings. But like you say, it feels like it's completely scheduled, and somehow then we always schedule 1 hour, because we never know, and then we use the full hour even if it's finished in 5 minutes. No, and I feel that, and then combine that with not having an open discussion. Okay, how are you really taking the time to getting to know each other? I'm going to start with a new client next Wednesday, and I already know that for me one of the challenges will be in the first week to make sure I have just one-on-one time with people that are fully remote, because most of them are out of the country, and just have time. Okay, let's first get together. And I know there's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, let's make sure that we understand, and that I know what takes you, what helps you. And that is sometimes hard without a full agenda and whatever. To make sure that we can do that. And
Yeah.
so, do you have any tips on working with these kind of things?
The back-to-back meetings, or both really, I guess.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm a big fan of things like random coffee. So I use that on Agile and the Ether. It's just people being paired up to have a chat for half an hour, to be whatever they want it to be about. I always think there's a term that I use, which I borrowed from someone else. I can't remember offhand, which is assisted serendipity. So it's like creating the opportunities for serendipity to happen. And I think random coffee is a good one to be able to do that. I mean, I always, if I'm having a meeting with someone, I will do a bit of like chit chat at the beginning, ask people where they are, ask them what they've got on their bookshelves behind them. I can see just something to connect people a little bit. I think is helpful, but I think it's hard, because it is hard for people to, as you say, if you're asking someone who's really busy. So if you're working with somebody who's really senior and you're saying, can we just have a chat? That's a difficult ask when someone's like, oh, let me get my diary manager to like help slot you in somewhere, and there isn't the time to do that. So it is like it's one of those problems where everyone knows it's a problem, but they don't have the time to do it. Like everyone's like, every time I hear this all the time, we're too busy to do blah. Everyone's too busy because we fill up our time, so we're always too busy. I don't think that really answers your question, but I think
I think basically what you're saying is make sure that we make time for that and find ways to do that. And it reminds me of something I read years ago about I think it was in couples therapy or something. What they really said is that sometimes you need to make time, just schedule going out with your partner, even people considering schedule sex, because it feels very strange. But if you're fully into that kind of moment, that you're so busy living your lives, then you need to make sure that you have, and maybe it's not just sex, but just have intimate time with your partner. Let's make sure that you have some time without distractions, no phones, no children, no whatever anyone can pop up. Just make sure that you have some personal time. And it's something that I've seen a lot just with my partnership, but with many people during COVID. That's okay. We've been so busy surviving. Now we need to make sure that we make again time for the personal connections to make sure that it's happening.
It's like eating together, right? So it's good if you to eat at a table with other people. And again, that's something we always do, and those people that are in the office probably still do. We always did in the office, right? You grab your work friends and you go and sit down. You probably have a good old moan about something someone's work that you're doing, and you get that kind of chance to kind of like vent, let some stuff go, chat about some problems, kind of think through some things before you go back to work. And those things are quite difficult to do when you don't have those opportunities anymore.
Yeah, I recognize that. It's very tempting to keep busy and to do other stuff and not do things together. It's and it's so important. It is indeed so important. And you kind of talked already a little bit about it when you talked about books and things like that. So, what is a book that you have read that you want to talk
about? So with what I was. It's the book that I'm going to talk about. Actually, it's not the most recent book I read, and I'm going to mention the most recent book I read in a minute because it's really interesting. It's fascinating. So I, on my desk here, I have Social Physics by Alex Pentland, or Sandy Pentland, as he is known.
And this is another way of, so this is two different kind of covers. So already showing that it's not so recent book, I would say. If it has multiple covers, for me, it also means that it's been a popular book one way or another. So why is it an interesting book for people to read it?
So yeah, it goes back quite a way. It looks like oh god, it looks like 1952. Some of this stuff. So what I find really interesting about what he talks about, so he's all about like how ideas and innovation flows around kind of human systems. So it's the subtitle here is How Social Networks Can Make Us Smarter. So this idea that when I think what I really take from this is a quote that he says that human communities have a greater intelligence than the members of those communities. So it's like when we pull together people to work together and collaborate with each other, we get something that's greater than the sum of its parts. He also talks about flow of information around organizations, and he's done things like measure the interactions that happen with different people across different organizations, whether that be through email interactions, or one organization, they had these little devices that measured who was talking to who, like not what they were saying, but how those interactions happen. So what the kind of communication.
So they were walking around with these devices. Is that how I should see it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that plus emails, like who's talking to who, which departments are talking to which departments, and kind of mapping out some of that to go, well, there's heavy communication between some of the departments that you would expect to have heavy communication between them, and very little communication between other bits of the organization. And I'm always like this kind of fascinated by this. It's essentially mapping out where information silos happen. And I've done this as well. I've done some mapping of how information flows around a group of people that kind of sit under the same function. And what you see is there are some people that everyone goes to find out information, and there are some kind of very strong ties where, like, you might have a team where everything stays within the team and nothing comes out of that team. You might have some outliers that don't really talk to anyone, and it's really fascinating to see, because what that really depicts is that you've got knowledge and decision making and learning and collaboration all happens in these little pockets where you're kind of missing out on things happening across the piece better, and you're kind of siloing, particularly what Alex Penton talks about, you're kind of siloing the disciplines. So you're like, well, HR never need to talk to engineers, and their information, like, they've got nothing to say to each other, which is really not true.
And then they don't understand each other, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And I see this, the talk that I've done a few times recently, a couple of conferences, which is called Why Can't We All Just Get Along? Which is actually, I see this really a lot in teams as well. You get these in-team silos, and this feels like it's on the increase in a not very helpful way. There seems to be a lot of battling between disciplines that are all trying to do the same thing. So you get product here, engineering here, and they're fighting against each other to who's in control and who has the power and who's making decisions. Or you'll get in a team, somebody would design something and throw it over to the wall to the next person, and they'll throw it over to the wall to the next person, and it looks like a team, but actually it's these little silos. And then you're not getting the benefit that comes from when people get together and they get the opportunity to build on top of each other's ideas. You get something that's better than the sum of its parts. Wow. The other thing that really kind of stands out in social physics is this story about and it links back to that idea of serendipity. So the story about giving people the opportunity to talk to each other in social situations makes the organization smarter. So he did this experiment with a call center. So the call center had staggered coffee breaks. He said, let's do this thing where everyone has a coffee break together. And what happened is that during the coffee break, people have conversations with each other. They share their experiences. They problem solve. They do all those things that you do when you're sitting at lunch, sitting at coffee with other people. And that just raised everyone's ability. And so they measured that in how many kind of successful calls they had in the call center. And they predicted it saved them something like $15 million a year just by changing those
having extra coffee breaks,
yeah,
which is expensive.
yeah, exactly. And I've had this and this is one reason why I think communities are so important, like giving people the time out of the day to day just to kind of reflect sometimes and listen to each other and learn from each other. I once had a conversation with somebody who said they were talking about kind of Six Sigma and like, trimming down everything in the system to make it as super lean as possible. And I said, it's like having coffee stations on every floor of the office so that people don't have to spend time traveling to the canteen to have coffee. And it was like, no, like everything. It might take more time to walk to the canteen, but maybe while they're walking to the canteen, they're having a conversation. Maybe when they get to the canteen, they're going to bump into somebody that they needed to see, or they're going to share something that means that they get to solve a problem when they get back to their desk.
Yeah, it reminds me as when I started working, and of course, gradually, I started working at a small company. So there is the one place where you get the coffee and everything. So that's kind of fine. But when you get to larger companies, someone really had to teach me that, hey, if you can go to another floor and you can get your coffee there, because then you can meet people from that floor and then you can actually have a chat. And it's like, wow, it's so logical, but I didn't think about it. But it's something that you gradually learn when you work in these kind of larger offices. That okay, you're not forced to have your coffee at the same floor. You can just have your coffee at the other department, and you can run into these people that you normally only see in meetings when you disagree, and now you can have a chit chat about whatever. It's like,
yeah, and then those people, if you start to build a bit more empathy and understanding, then maybe when you're disagreeing, you'll know where they're coming from, what their motivations are, and why that's different. Steve Jobs was a big fan of designing offices so that people moved around them and bumped into people. I think there's a story about the fact that people complained that the toilets were too far away because he was trying to get people to walk through the office to go to the bathroom. But the other story, like I was talking to someone once about project management community. And I was talking to him about this idea about, people just having time to talk to each other, listen to each other. And he said, oh, yeah, because in the organization that he worked in, they used to have like a work bus. So everyone would get on the work bus and travel to work together. He was like, it was brilliant because you knew everyone because you spent time with them like every day and you got to talk to them every day. And it was like this light bulb went off and he was like, oh, yeah, not having that has meant that we don't know each other anymore. So,
yeah, but I once heard a story from a university in Belgium, and I don't know I don't know how true it is, but the story went that they had where the students were doing some kind of work, they had coffee breaks or something to get coffee or drinks at the end of the not the building, at the end of the office they were in, the large hall they were in, and people were chatting, and there were people complaining, and so they moved it outside. But what they've learned over the years is that they needed a lot more people to help them out, because now the students were not talking so much to each other and they didn't help each other. So they needed, I don't know if it's professors or other kind of people, but they needed more people to help the students solving problems, because they didn't talk to each other that much, because people went out and then just had a coffee probably on their own and then went in. But now if 2 or 3 people went out, you see a friend standing up, maybe you get up at the same time, you have a chit chat or whatever. That happened a lot less. And so it also similar kind of story to what you said. I don't know if it's in millions, but if people don't have a natural way to talk to each other, then you need to solve it in a probably more expensive way, and have official people for solving things. It's yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you wanted to talk about the second book. You had something else you wanted to
Yeah.
mention.
So just interesting. I listened. I generally listen to books. I listened to a book recently, just come out, called People Hacker, by Jenny. I have just forgotten her name. I will tell you in just a sec. By Jenny Radcliffe. And she actually, I first heard her talking on a podcast called Dotnet Diaries. So Dotnet Diaries is kind of about hacking, mostly about ethical hacking. She's from, and I saw her talk actually at Waterstones, a kind of book launch thing the other night. She's a Scouse, she's local. And she does social engineering, and it's just fascinating. So social engineering and physical penetration testing, which is, breaking into buildings and convincing people to do things that they shouldn't do, that give away secrets or give away access. And it's just really fascinating because in that field, it talks about, we're only, our systems and our data and all that stuff is only as secure as the people that kind of have access to them or access to it. Like, we can put in tons of kind of technical security. We can even put in like physical locks and things, but actually if somebody's going to let someone in the building, then all that goes out the window. And there was so it's a fascinating book because she talks about a lot about some of the things she's done over the years that maybe less legal at the beginning of her career and probably more legal now. Breaking into buildings, getting into Glastonbury, and various kind of high drama things like falling off roofs. So it's
Wow.
really fascinating to listen to. But there was another story on Dotnet Diaries recently. And this kind of brings it full circle again. So it was a similar situation where there's a guy that does social engineering, physical penetration testing, and he told a story about a company where they were trying to get into the building, and part of so they if they break into the building, they tell their client, this is how we got in. They prove it by getting something that's in the building or leaving something in the building. And then give them a report and say, therefore, these are the things that you need to fix. And it usually ends up with some training that happens that people probably then forget again at some point. And this one place that he tried to get into, they were trying to get into, somebody stopped them. And the person that stopped them wasn't even working that day. They just happened to be driving past, and they said, oh, what are these guys doing there? And they went over and checked and questioned them and managed to stop them getting into the building by just saying, you shouldn't be here, like you shouldn't have access. And they tried again, and something similar happened with someone else. And it kind of transpired that the reason that happened, and the reason the guy that first stopped them wasn't even working that day, he was just driving past. The reason that happened is that the people that worked at that company cared so much about the company that they questioned like someone that might kind of pose a threat to it in some way. And it put it back full circle to me, to like this kind of idea that if you treat people well and they're happy and they like you and you create loyalty because you are nice to each other, then
they will treat you back again.
They will treat you back, and they will be your kind of best line of defense in people hacking
even when they're not working. It's it's been fascinating, these kind of stories. I have somewhere back there a book from Mitnick, was that one of the famous first hackers. But actually, if you read the book, that most of his hacking was not done physically. It was also done, with social hacking, talking to people and getting access and getting inside buildings and getting access to passwords and pretending to be, I don't know, someone who could help them out. And with that, it's fascinating what you could do, and actually being nice to people, and then they be nice to you and they let you in, but maybe they should not. And it's one of the most fascinating things is that I read that asking actually security people for help for doing whatever, and then they have to think between helping and which is what the natural tendency is for people, and then doing their job, and somehow that works in a lot of cases. But I find it a fascinating idea about, okay, how could you make something secure? And indeed, you need all these kind of things. And at the same time, we want people to collaborate. We want people to trust. I want people, everybody who's in the building, to trust them, to make sure that, okay, we can work together and to not be suspicious. And at the same time, you don't want to be the bad guys to be able to enter the building. And how do we deal with that? And I find it fascinating because for working together with people, once people are inside the building, we should be able to treat them as anyone who should access to everything and help out. But at the same time, indeed, what happens with people who are able to get themselves inside the building? And these are fascinating things. So thanks for sharing that. It's and definitely we'll try to put the links to both of these books and to the podcast and everything in the show notes if you send them afterwards to have the exact links. I want to move to for me one of the most interesting questions, that is what question do you think I should also ask you? Is there anything that I didn't ask that you still think you want to talk about?
I don't know. I think maybe and this is a hard one because like, what do I not want you to ask me as well? I don't know. I guess I had one thought earlier, which was what is one thing you wish you could do but maybe don't have the patience to learn? Maybe that might be a good question.
What is that?
I think for me, I think I just wish I was a bit better at. I wish I could make apps, actually. That's it. I wish I could make some stuff. Wish I could build things. I hack things together with WordPress apps and my favorite coding language, Google Spreadsheets.
Which in a sense is also I wouldn't want to pay all the number of companies that are actually working around spreadsheets one way or another, and that then they want to replace by a better system that takes years to build because the spreadsheets are so geniusly built by many people. It's I find it interesting that I'm very much in favor of Kanban boards and everything, but for a lot of the community projects I'm doing, I'm working mostly with Google Spreadsheet because I can track multiple kind of things. It's really, even just for this one, I track everybody I want to talk to in a spreadsheet because I can track the day that is scheduled. I can track so many things that is a lot harder to do with a Kanban board or whatever. So it's
and I mean, with Google Spreadsheet, you get fun. You can do scripting. You can do formulas. You can do stuff. I think with Trello, doesn't really work if it's not a day-to-day thing. I think that's what makes it quite difficult.
That's already a good thing. But for me, there's also different kind of statuses that, okay, if someone wants to talk to me, but maybe later or things like that, and then, okay, how do I track how many people I want to talk to, who is already, okay, if it's recorded, that's easy. That could be in different kind of columns. But there's so many other things that I want to track and have, and who's invited who. Let's put that somewhere that's easier in a spreadsheet than all kind of details and things like that. And like you say, I can add lots of scripts and then colors and whatever to it. And so if you think about going back, you said, if I understood the question correct or the answer correct, is like, okay, creating apps or stuff like that. Did you ever try one way or another? Did you?
I think it's that for me. For me, it's about the patience. I think I like to get things done quickly. So here's an example. I have a Slack group that I run, which is for a very small bunch of people that I set up when I kind of started running, and I was like, let's have a bunch of supportive people on a Slack group, and we kind of do exercise and cheer each other on. And one of the things, I have a few apps that run in that Slack group, which is ones that like pull in Strava data. One that my favorite one is I have a cat called Eric. So Eric is and I have a bot that is Eric that is in the Slack group and talks to people and says various cat-like things, and sometimes just randomly says stuff. And it's just, I end up kind of going, oh, I don't know, I don't have the patience to sit down and learn, so I just hack it together with Zapier and spreadsheets.
But yeah, it seems to work. But like you say, maybe it's just the basics, and if you could program it, it could become much more. That's the kind of thing. But I think there's a lot of things that are happening indeed with Zapier and all kind of these low code solutions that allow us to create something. But I'm not sure if lots of money and lots of time for an app would make it so much better. And in some sense, sometimes it's indeed just enough what you have with your Slack group. I remember that Agile in the Ether. There is like you said, the random coffee. That's also a bot that does all of that.
Yeah, I use Donut for that, which is a Slack app. But actually, all of these things, and this is kind of interesting when you're working on small scale. So like the Donut bot for Agile in the Ether is free up until a point, and actually there is a lot of stuff that starts to get quite expensive quite quickly. And there's if I'm doing work stuff, then I'll pay for the products that I need. When I'm doing community stuff, I'm always a bit like, I don't want to be paying tons of money. I do pay for some things, but I don't want to be paying over the odds for something that's community run, because it starts to feel like I'm always like, I want that stuff to feel community run. Like with Agile in the Ether, I don't want to go like full on big sponsorship or anything like that, because it starts to feel, for this particular community, it starts to feel less genuine. So I'm like, I want to keep that like that. So it's about like, what can I do? Yeah, what do I have within my gift to do without needing to fund it too heavily?
And I have two kind of reactions. Well, first of all, you could also, of course, ask in the Agile in the Ether community if they want to pay a little bit. I'm not talking sponsorship, but if people would pay a little bit to be part of that community. But that might feel different in the community, so that might be. But the other thing is, people might be able to help you out. There's so many smart people in that community that could program maybe something that you can't. So there might be some extras there as well. You don't have to do everything yourself.
What?
Sorry, surprise. We're making a joke out of it, but I've seen this so many times in communities that it started and somehow the founder does everything. I have the Agile conference calendar that is now been maintained. There's more than 300. I think we're about 400 people adding things off. And a lot of it is now run, even the people accepting other people is not run by me anymore, because other people jumping in. But it took me a long time to realize, hey, I could actually ask for help. There's a lot of people that want to help out. And yeah, it somehow when we start something, even if there's a lot of community, a lot of people supporting, it feels like we as I'll talk for myself, me as the person who started it, have to do everything at first. No, there's actually a lot more people that want to jump in. The only thing is we need to ask the magic word, and that's, can someone help me?
It's so true. And I tell people that with communities all the time, to be honest. So, we're always better at giving advice than we are at taking our own advice.
Yeah, but that's why I dare to say it, because I know I'm bad at this as well. And yeah, it's I know a lot of people, and I don't know how it is about you, but yeah, basically when I say it, it's also a reminder for myself to
Yes.
make sure that I look up of all the things. And I'm actually in the exact same phase for Who's Agile. Like at this point, it feels like, okay, recording it is one thing, but editing it, marketing, everything around is like, I definitely need to create a small team around it. And okay, I need to start working on that, because otherwise it's not maintainable. And it's very tempting to keep everything myself.
I think there starts to be a question as well around why are you doing something, and what the value is to you. So I've had this question with Agile. So Agile in the Ether, I keep it to 25 people for a meetup, and there are people that can never get a spot because the spots go very quickly. And just a couple of times you have people that are going, oh, well, you need to make it bigger, or you need to run it more often. And I don't actually. I don't need to do that at all. And partly it's like I run it because it is like I get value out of it. And if I'm not doing that, then for me it's like, well, I'm not going to run it. Like I need to get something. I don't get paid for doing stuff. It's just it. Yeah, I need to get something out of it as well. So it's like some of that is around the of doing something.
Yeah, and I fully agree. I'm one of these people who's almost always late to get connected to Agile in the Ether, so I haven't been there in a long time. At the same time, I fully understand it. So I might sometimes feel frustrated, and I already know if I see the email like 4 or 5 hours after you send it, I don't even try to apply because I know it will be full. And that's okay. I mean, it might create some FOMO with me, but at the same time, like, okay, this is part why it's working, because it's a small community, because everything that you put around it. And yeah, I've learned, especially the last years, to think, okay, I want to make sure that from time to time, I can be part of that community. And then a lot of other times I don't worry too much about it, because then I have more time for other kind of things. And yeah, I fully understand the same thing here. I could create so much more out of that, and making sure it's all on all these other platforms, but that would take too much time for me right now. And for me, the biggest value is having the conversation with you. And so that brings my value. I'm happy to share it with the rest of the world because I know many people like it. But at this moment, I don't have the energy to put it on other platforms. And if I don't find a team to help out, that won't happen. It's just I definitely would prefer to take more time and find energy to find people than to find energy to do something every week on other platforms, because there's not much energy at this point. And I think that's a lot similar to what you're saying. Yeah? The 25 people, it feels really like, yeah, it's a small little event. It's not many people. When you're there, you kind of feel that you can talk to anyone and you know everybody, even if it's not always, well, for me, it's not always people I know, but it feels very general and it feels very connectedly. So that is what's nice about that.
Just one thing on that, always join the waiting list, because I can always see who's on the waiting list, and places do come up. So I would advise doing that. The other thing I did actually is I just open source the format and said anyone can do in the Ether. Here it is. Some people have done. There are people that do kind of their event in the Ether and follow a similar model.
Oh, that's interesting to know. I didn't know, but that's actually a very smart idea to get more of this, because it's a very the way you run it with everything. It's very nice with the Slack and everything around that. Okay, I want to move to that last question about who do you think I should ask next? Who else do you want me to invite?
So I think I mentioned a couple of people. So do you know Giles Turnbull?
Well, I don't know him, and I know that you prepared one person that I forgot. Who was the person? Let me check if I can. Yeah, that's the person. Oh, sorry, but there was some strange thing going on in my slides. Where is that? I should bring him up on screen right now. I think that's him, right?
Yes, that's him.
Sorry, it took a while. So why should I invite him?
So Giles, who is a lovely person, I've known him for years, working at various organisations. Like I first met him when I worked at Government Digital Service, where his role was about telling the story of GDS. So he has a book that he wrote that came out a little while ago called the Agile Comms Handbook. So he is all about how communication fits in with agile, but also how you do communication in just a really clear way. I think he's brilliant.
Wow, that sounds already interesting as a person to talk to. So thanks for inviting him. And then I think you had one or two more people that you were thinking about.
Yes, and I don't know if I'm going to get her name right here. There's a woman called Thiazi Onofrio, who is a software engineer at Thoughtworks in Brazil.
And I think, oops, is that her?
That is her, yes.
And let's bring you back. So how do you meet her? How do you meet someone in Brazil, and why do you want me to?
So, I didn't meet her in Brazil, actually. I met her at a conference recently. So I met her at CraftConf in Budapest, which is a lovely conference. I don't know if you've ever been to it.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't.
So it's just a really nice conference in a train museum in Budapest. Wow. And actually, I know you've spoken to Azlam Khan before. I got to see Azlam there. I haven't seen him for a while, so that was lovely. There was lots of really lovely people. Actually, really nice group. So she is at Thoughtworks in Brazil. Mainly, if I were you, I think it would be really interesting to speak to someone in Brazil and find out what the scene looks like there, because I don't know myself. She did a talk around shift left testing, so bringing quality into every part of your flow. I think she'd be a brilliant person to talk to.
Well,
and she's lovely.
Well, I would say, of course, at this moment, I think Thoughtworks has about 10,000 people, so it's kind of strange to say everybody there is nice, but the people that I've met from Thoughtworks these days, and the people that used to work there, it's like almost amazing. It's almost like a stamp, like, okay, these are people that are interesting to talk to. I'm not sure how they can do that for the full 10,000 people, but at least the people that are out in the community that I've met are really wonderful people. I've just put a video live yesterday with Rob Sollars, who is also from Thoughtworks, but then working in the Netherlands these days. But yeah, that many people there are really worthwhile to talk to. So thanks for bringing that person up. Was there a third person you wanted to talk, or is that the
I think I shared another person with you. Was it Ruchi?
Indeed, but I don't have a picture from Ruchi. The only thing I have is something like this from his website. But I help you think better is something I really like. So it was like that's
she's got a Medium blog. And she does really lovely, really clear illustrations of ideas. And I always love to see concepts explained in a really kind of nice, clear way. And she does really lovely visuals around that. So she's like, one thing I do at the moment is recently I started a kind of news, recently-ish, I started a newsletter which is where I share things that I've been reading that week. I very selfishly, I started that because I wanted to make myself read more blogs. And so I was like, I know how to do it. I know how to make myself do something. I kind of create a public commitment to do it, and then I just kind of have to do it. And so I subscribe to, I think, like 100 RSS feeds.
Wow.
As much as I think people think a lot of people don't even know RSS feeds exist anymore, but they do. So I subscribe to a whole bunch. She's one of the people.
And how did you subscribe to them? Just out of curiosity.
I use an app called Feedly, which brings them all into one place. And
interesting, because just this morning I read an article about Google Reader, how it's been dead for 10 years, and lots of different. But it was really interesting to see how that that idea for Google Reader was there. Indeed, a lot to bring out RSS to the world, but not just for text, but for a lot of other things. But somehow it got the name Reader, and then people only saw one part of that was actually the original vision from the people who created it. And then that
it's amazing, because I don't like, so interestingly on Agile and the Ether, I had a discussion. So I created a little app with Zapier and Google Spreadsheets, where when people in the community that have opted in write a blog post, it pulls the blog post in through RSS and posts it up and says, so and so's written a blog post. And it's like, it's me sharing their stuff, so they don't have to feel like they're doing self-promotion. It comes up anyway. And we had
that's an interesting thing, because it helps people. Yeah, but you're kind of solving a problem of people. Yeah, we write it, we don't want to share it too often. At the same time, we should. Yeah. Oh, that's smart.
So I'm sharing it for them. Lift people up where you can. And I had a discussion about this, about RSS on there, and people were like, I don't really know some people don't really know what that is. I was like, well, you've got this feed that comes with your blog, and it means that, when new stuff comes in, it will appear in some kind of reader, and it feels, it's one of those things that feels very 2000s, but it's still there, and actually it creates this ability to bring all these things that you want to read into one place.
I still miss Google Reader, because for me it felt really like a good way to group everything. I should really try out more of the tools, because I haven't really replaced it. And indeed, I know my blog, I know that the RSS feed is read in at least a few places. So yeah, it helps in lots of different things. It's yeah.
There was a blog that I was reading that they shifted their platform, and their RSS disappeared. And I messaged them. I was like, "Can I have it back, please?"
Yeah, somehow people think it's no longer. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I was using a tool in between for creating a better RSS, and most of it linked to that. But that was also a Google tool that disappeared. So there's like, okay, I need to look back what's my original RSS and get it working.
Yeah. So yeah, I use Feedly to read stuff. It has on the free plan, it has a limit of 100 subscriptions, and 2 categories, I think. But yeah, anyway.
That's already a lot of things to read and a lot of things to do. So thank you for your time, Emily. If people want to reach out to you, what's a good way for people to reach out to you?
Probably my blog, which is emilyweber.co.uk. I don't know. I would have said Twitter, but this week I don't know about that.
I haven't prepared Twitter anymore for anyone in a long time, because I felt like at best I prepared LinkedIn, and yeah, today I didn't even think about preparing.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Mastodon. We're waiting to see what wins out, right? But I'm around the internet.
That's it. I will put the different links that I have of you in the show notes if people want to reach out. But thanks anyway for your time. It's been wonderful. A little bit like you said in the beginning, we go in all kind of directions. We talk about all different kind of things. But that's what is also what makes for me the interesting part. It's really feeling much more connected to get to know someone like you. And indeed, you're just not one person into one little thing. You're coming from a lot of background and you share a lot of things. But I hear a lot of passion about doing stuff and being active, and that's also how I got to know you. So thanks for taking this time to do this with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun, and it's good to compare bookshelves. We've got a lot more folders.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.